Hi, I'm Shawn Warren with Painting with Peeps, and I'm going to be doing an upcoming class on these thread balls. And no, it's not painting, but I think you're really going to enjoy making these. So these are beautiful embroidered Japanese thread balls. We're going to go through the steps for embroidering the outside, but you will need to prepare your ball in advance, and this video will show you how. You start off with a styrofoam ball, and this is about a 3-inch styrofoam ball. And we're going to cover it with yarn first, and I don't have one right now that's covered with the yarn that I can show you, but I can show you the next step. So I'm going to go through this step by step, don't worry, but this is what it looks like when it's naked. Then we cover it with yarn, and after we cover it with yarn, we cover it with sewing thread. This one right here is covered with sewing thread. This will be the ball that you bring to the class. Will be a styrofoam ball that's covered with yarn and covered with sewing thread. So here's one of them. This is actually pretty easy. It's not nearly as hard as it looks. So there's that one. And then this is more like a Christmas one. You can use these on Christmas trees. What I like to do is I have this big jar that I like to put them in. You can put them in a big bowl, or I've also bought those little egg stands. They're like crystal, and I don't have one in my bucket here to show you, but it sits here and you can just display them like in a curio cabinet or on a bookcase or anywhere. You can display them like that. So they're not really Christmas ornaments, but you can definitely use them for that. Here's one that's similar to the wishing papers. Can you see that? And all of these start with a styrofoam ball that's been wrapped in yarn and then wrapped in sewing thread. Here's another one. Give that a little spin so you can see it. And in Japan, this is a real ancient kind of craft. And in Japan, they were made for toys. The kids would play with these like they would hacky sacks. Of course, they wouldn't have a styrofoam ball inside. They would have some kind of fabric that was balled up, and then they would take strips of sometimes silk, like from old kimonos, and wrap it, and then they would embroider the surface of the ball with leftover threads from kimonos. So they would take the old kimonos and they would take it apart and pull the threads out, and they would use that and recycle the materials to make these balls that the kids would play with. And then a lot of times what they would do is a tradition that at the beginning of the new year, the child would receive one of these like under their pillow or as a New Year's gift every year. First of all, you're going to want just some generic, even if you have scrap yarn, that's fine. It's going to take almost a whole skein, but you can use different colors of yarn too. So if you have a little bit of this and a little bit of that, different colors that you just have left over from another project, it's fine to use that. So you're just going to want to start very simply, start wrapping the ball. And you want to keep turning it as you do it. You don't want any big bumps in it. So you're going to want to keep turning it this way and that, and just try to avoid having any places where the thread overlaps too many times and makes an X or some kind, like that, you know what I'm saying? So you don't have it making big bumps. And you want to do it fairly tight too. If it's too loose, it's going to fall off the styrofoam ball while you're working, and that really is not fun. So you just keep wrapping and wrapping and turning and wrapping. And I'm actually going to speed this video up so you won't have to spin. This probably takes me, the yarn part is going to probably take me a half an hour to get all the yarn on it. So I'm going to keep going, and you go make yourself a cup of tea, and when you come back, I'll have this all covered with yarn. Okay, this actually did not take me half an hour. This took me about 10 minutes, and I'm looking for my scissors. When you've got the ball pretty much evenly covered and you can't see any of the styrofoam ball, then clip off your yarn, and you're going to want to take a tapestry needle, big yarn needle, thread your yarn needle. Okay, and then you want to just bury it in, make sure it's pulled tight, and then just kind of weave it, sew it through there so it doesn't come undone. And I go a couple different directions. Just how you get the tail of that ball. You want the tail of the ball to be buried, or the tail of the yarn to be buried in the ball. Okay, and then you can just snip off. If you have a little extra tail, you can just snip it off. Okay, so that's the first step. So this is what your ball will look like. It should be pretty evenly covered with yarn. And then what you can do is, I usually like kind of roll it on the table a little bit, roll it like this on the table so you get any bumps, kind of work it out, any bumps before you start covering it with thread. And when you put the thread on, pick a color thread that's the color of the ball you want to use, the background of the ball that you want to use. And I use cotton thread. You can use those big cone threads of polyester thread like that you get for a serger. That also works. Let's see what we have here today. So you can see I have some already prepared. What I usually do, I like to do is, I'll just sit and prepare a bunch of balls. Like if I'm sitting there and watching television or doing something like that, I will prepare some balls in advance. So here I have a blue one. Let me see what I have for thread. I think I'll use some more pink thread. Looks like I have a good deal. I got these at a garage sale. It's cotton thread, so I like the cotton thread because it's not slippery. The polyester thread is a little more slippery, and it's also thinner. So the thinner the thread, the more times you're going to have to wrap it around the ball. So here I have my pink thread. And you do the same thing that you did with the yarn. You just use the thread. And be sure it's anchored the first few times. Yeah, just keep covering, covering, covering. Keep moving your ball around. And you're going to think this is going to never cover, but it does. And you want to put it on as thickly as you can. And I usually give my finger a good lick. And it helps the yarn, it helps you to be able to put the thread on thicker. So I'm going to keep wrapping, so I'm going to speed this up a little bit so that you don't have to watch me wrap this for the next hour. If you see that there's a bump, if you hold it up to the light, sometimes you can see that there's a bump, especially as it starts getting more full of thread. What you want to do is you want to put it down on the table at that point and roll it around on the table, like back and forth, roll it all around on the table, and that will roll the bumps out. So that'll help if you do that a few times as you're doing it. If you see that there's bumps, like I can see there's a bump right here, so I'm going to roll it down on the table. Sorry you can't see it in the camera, but I think you have the idea. Roll it around the table like that. So, and you might have, there might be a little bit of the thread that comes off, but that's okay. And if you get like a kink in it, if you get a knot in your thread, it's okay to cut it off. Take a needle, again, bury that needle in the ball, and then start again with a new piece of thread after the knot. You don't want to leave the knot there because it'll show up and it'll end up being a bump. So you want it to be nice and smooth. And the tighter you put it on, the smoother it will be. Okay, we're going to pretend that this ball is completely filled with thread. I'm not going to go through and do the entire thing. I'll show you a finished ball. So what you do is when it's all completely covered and you've rolled all the bumps out, then you want to do what you did with the yarn, and you just want to take a regular sewing needle, use a pretty long one, and you want to pull that through several times. You want to fasten it in there, okay, just like that. And then you want to take your little tail, and you can just cut your little tail off. Cut your little tail off. Okay? So this is what it looks like when it's finished. Take that out of there. So you'll have a ball that's completely round, and that you can't see the yarn through anymore, okay? And it's going to be real hard. You want it to be real hard. If it's real squishy, that means you're not winding either your yarn or your thread tight enough. So try to wind it so that it's not squishy. It is a good idea, even though I said it doesn't matter what color thread you use and what color yarn you use. If you really don't want to put quite as much thread on it, then have your yarn color be the same or a similar color to your thread color. See, if there's black yarn under here, then the black thread is going to cover it easier. If you have white yarn under here, it's not going to cover quite as easily. You can still use, you know, a different color yarn, but it just makes it a little easier to cover. This is called preparing a foundation for your Temari ball. Sometimes I'll cut these in half with an electric knife, and I will hollow out the middle just a little bit, just make a little cavity in the middle, and sometimes I'll put a bell in it. Just a little bell. That's why I had this bell in here. Just one of these, those little tiny bells. I'll put a little tiny bell in there. Other times I'll make it kind of like a fortune cookie, and I'll write, if it's for a special person, I'll write on a little piece of paper whatever I want to tell them. Sometimes I'm praying for them, and I don't want that kind of just to go with them and, you know, be a blessing to them. So I'll write that on the little piece of paper, and I'll put that inside that little cavity instead of the bell. And then what you do is you put the two halves together, and when you wrap it with yarn, you will wrap those two sides back together, and they'll stay together, and it'll be just like a whole ball at that point. So that's how you prepare the surface of the Temari ball. Now I want to tell you a little bit about the supplies that we use. And there is a supply list down in the comments below, and you'll need to bring these with you when you come to class. They sell all of this at Hobby Lobby. That's been one of the best places I've found this, and it's pearl cotton. Let me show you what it looks like before I put it on the little card. So I have a whole bag of pearl cotton, all different colors, and these cost like about a buck, $1.20 each. And they come in this skein like this. Okay, this is not embroidery floss. Okay, this is pearl cotton. There's a difference. This is 1 ply. Embroidery floss is, I think, 3 ply. So when you buy it, this says craft thread. So this is the same thing, though. I actually bought a big package of this at Hobby Lobby, and it was called craft thread. You can use that as long as it's single ply. It's not quite as shiny, I noticed, as pearl cotton, but it works just as well. Let me see if I can find one that's actually pearl cotton. Not right off, I'm not finding it. So you can, anyway, for like, I think it was like $8, you can buy a great big package of this with multiple colors, and that might be what you want to do so you have plenty of colors to choose from. Then what I do is I get these little cards, and I think I got these at Hobby Lobby as well. I might have got them at a needlepoint store. So they're a little bigger than the ones that you would use for embroidery floss. So what I do is I take it and I put it around the card, and it's a lot easier. It doesn't get tangled when you're working on it. So what you're going to need to do is, if you'll notice on this ball, we have 3 different color themes going. We have the orange-yellow one. Let me get closer so you can see. We have the orange-yellow one. Okay, so you're going to need a light yellow, an orange, and a bright yellow, okay? And then you're going to have the blue one. So you need a dark blue, a medium blue, and a light blue. and then you have green. Dark green, medium green, light green. Okay, so those are the colors that you're going to need. Then along the middle, this is called the obi or the equator. And you're going to need, usually those are done in red, and that's a tradition. You don't have to do them in red, but that's just a Japanese tradition, is this be in red. So those are the colors that you're going to need. So you're going to need 9 colors plus the part that goes in the middle, okay? And the other thing you're going to want to get is some metallic thread. And the metallic thread is used for marking the ball. So see those metallic threads? We're going to mark the ball, and that's going to help us do our design. So you're going to want some thread for that. You can get the 3-ply thread for that, the 3-ply embroidery floss. You will just need to separate out those threads so that it's only single ply. You need, like I said, you need a yarn needle, and you need a needle for your sewing thread. And then you also will need an embroidery needle, not as big as the yarn needle, but you'll need an embroidery needle that's long enough for your pearl cotton. And the needle doesn't have to be super long. Let's see. But it doesn't need to be pointy either. Also bring a little ruler. This will be helpful too. If you have a little ruler you can bring. That's about it. Oh, one thing that is helpful you can bring, this is a needle puller, and I took an old rubber glove and cut it into sections, and this will just help you pull the needle through your ball. Your fingers do tend to get sore, or the needle does slip out, so if you want to do an old rubber glove and pull it out, that will be fine. Okay, so that covers preparing of the ball. When you come to class, I'm going to show you how to make this particular one called wishing papers. We'll go through all the steps, and I will give you a pattern that you can take home with you in case you want to make more of them. So I hope to see you soon. If you have any questions, please email me at info@letspaintdenver.com. And no, this isn't a painting, but you will love it. Okay, we'll talk to you later.